In this video, we're going to take you along on my journey to kill my first deer in 10 years with a bow. So I used to bow hunt, but about 10 years ago, I decided to give that up and just stick with guns. Well, this year I decided it would be fun to try again. I got a new Matthews Lift 29.5, and then we've been testing out several different arrow setups as well as a new bow sight over on our Review This Thing channel. So then obviously the next step is let's take it in the woods and see if I can get a deer. It did take me a few tries, but we finally were successful on a nice 8-pointer. You're gonna see the success, of course, at the end, but I also want to show you the realness of the failure of bow hunting, especially when you first get started and or get back into it when you haven't for several years. It's not easy, and hopefully we show you in this video how that's true. For our first time out, we figured we'd make it as simple as possible. We set up in a ground blind really close to a persimmon tree. We had this exact same setup a couple years ago where Robbie killed a doe. So we knew if they came into that space, they'd only be about 15 to 20 yards away, which should be perfect for me. Unfortunately, after a few hours of sitting in the early bow season heat, nothing came out. We didn't see anything until after dark, so we had to go to trip number 2. A few days later, we headed to the same piece of property, but a different spot. It's actually where I killed a really nice 6-pointer last year toward the end of season. On our way to the stand, we saw several fresh rubs and scrapes. So knowing it's a fairly frequented travel corridor, we were pretty hopeful. We only had a couple deer come within about 80 yards, so no drawing back, no shots were taken. We had to give it another try. A few days later, a cold front had come through, so we were excited that this could be the day. Lots of deer movement, hopefully. It could be the day I get a shot. So we went to a third setup on that same property. Deer come through there pretty often, and especially there's a field close by where they like to come in and out, hoping we could catch them during the day before it got dark. And thankfully, this sit was a lot more interesting. We had only been in the stand about 30 minutes when the first does came down from the field edge straight toward us. Oh, I see him. It's coming down this hill. There were 4 of them coming in, and I was getting pretty doggone excited at the thought of drawing back on my first deer in 10 years. I'd like to shoot that one that's walking at us, but apparently I got too excited. When it came time to draw back on these does, I was trying to be all stealthy and I could not get my bow drawn all the way back. And you might not have been able to tell it, but when I was trying to let it down, I accidentally hit the release and lobbed an arrow like 30 yards away from him. And that sound you heard was me hitting my microphone and it clanging down the stand as it went to the ground. Thankfully, they weren't completely spooked, but they did know something was up. All but the smallest one walked out of my range. They looked like they were thinking about coming back several times, but never did. Eventually, one of them kind of spotted us, knew something was up, and they all just left going back up the hill. So I took that time to, of course, make sure I could, in fact, draw my bow back all the way. I tried a few times, so now I was ready. Then while we were sitting there talking through what I needed to make sure I was focusing on, a buck came in pretty quickly into our area. He finally made his way around right in front of me at about 25 yards. I was able to draw back this time. I picked a spot, I aimed, released the arrow, and shot right over his back. Just like the does, he wasn't too terribly spooked, acted like he may come back. We were able to watch him for several minutes, get a really good look at the buck that I missed, but eventually he left like the other ones did. Needless to say, I was not too happy with myself. Through the rest of the evening, we had a couple other small does come in, some small bucks. Nothing really gave us a shot, and then right at dark, what looked to be a decent buck came in, but it was just too dark to shoot. After that, I went home and I practiced every single day. I was not going to let this happen again. At least I thought. Now we head in for our 4th time. Spoiler alert, I do kill the deer during this hunt, so make sure you watch all the way through. We headed into our fourth spot on this same property. Robbie has had a lot of success here. Busy corridor again, so as long as they would move during the daylight, I should have a chance. This hunt did not disappoint. We had only been in the stand about 30 minutes and we had our first does come in. There were 4 of them, and you know how there's always the one watching, so we had to wait for them to get all kind of settled in that area before I could draw back. Just as I was ready and drew back, they all moved and changed positions, so I didn't have a shot. Dang it. So I had to hold it full draw, waiting for an opportunity. Did I miss? I think I missed. I did, in fact, miss. I shot right underneath her. About an hour or so later, a couple more does came in. My heart started pumping. The larger one had circled around and was only about 20 yards away, but all I could see was her head. The rest of her was stuck behind a tree. While I waited and waited and waited and waited for her to take a step forward, she eventually caught a glimpse of something that she didn't like, saw us moving in the tree maybe, and was definitely a lot more skittish at this point. And I was pretty much not going to get drawn back on her. At first I was super disappointed until I heard movement and caught something out of the corner of my eye. A buck was coming in, so I completely gave up on the doe. Which was a good thing because she didn't really like him coming after her either, and she took off. Thankfully, that buck was more interested in where she had been than where she was going. So he continued to circle around and head to basically the exact same spot that she was. And he did the exact same thing, stayed behind that tree for what felt like forever. When he finally did step forward just enough to expose that front shoulder, I was able to draw back and get settled right where I wanted to aim. Well, I must have done something funky with my grip whenever I shot, because you can see that arrow take a hard left at just the wrong time, and I shot way far back. A few short minutes later, we had about 6 or 7 more bucks, 4 or 5 does that came in, and they hung out all around us for about another hour or more until well after dark, which meant I had about another hour or more to beat myself up for yet another bad shot. But that time was also really good because it forced us to sit and wait and not just jump down too soon and go looking for that deer. We knew that it was a bad shot and we were going to have to give it time, but that pretty much made us. Unfortunately, the camera in our battery died, so I don't have any footage of after we calmed down. But the next day, this is how it went. We did it, you guys. Tell you what, this is a heck of a story. I shot him last night. Made a less than ideal shot. It's way too far back. So we knew it was going to be a while. We tracked him for about 125 yards or so last night and then lost blood. So we just backed out. Came back in today. Didn't really find much more blood. So talked to a friend who said, find the creek. So we did. And he was there. And we were able to finish him off. And here he is. I tell you, hard fought. Just shows that sometimes you can't give up. Bad shot doesn't mean the end of the story. First bow kill in 10 years. Biggest buck ever with a bow. It's awesome. Gotta love it. That's why we do it. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for helping us find him.